Boker Tov, Shavua Tov. Today's daf is daf Samach Ches in Sandhedrin Zilun for Chenuchel Beis Yisrael. On a soon about Rav Shapiro. The Mishnah on Samach Zayin said, talking about the sorcerer, the end of the Mishnah said, Rabbi Akiva said, in the name of Rabbi Yoshua, that if two different people were gathering cucumbers via sorcery, one is potter and one is chayiv for committing sorcery, which is the punishment we said is chayiv skila. The one who does it, who actually does it, and physically does it, is chayiv. Ha'och is a sinayim, but the one who simply makes an optical illusion and didn't really gather the cucumbers, an optical illusion, he's potter. Potter avalosi, you shouldn't play around with that kind of stuff, and you shouldn't be that type of a magician, but you're not chayiv misa for that. So this story, this issue with the two different people who did cucumbers is just an example. Rabbi Akiva said, name of Yeshua, two people did it. One actually did it, he's chayiv misa. If one just did it as an optical illusion, he is potter. So he said that, Rabbi Akiva said that name of Yeshua, says the Gemara. The last couple of words on Samachan Beis, Rabbi Akiva, that case, Rabbi Akiva, at the top of Samaches, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yeshua Gamarla. Did Rabbi Akiva really learn this business about sorcery of Kisha from Rabbi Yeshua? Patani we learn Shechala, Rabbi Lezer ben Hyrcanus was sick. Now Rabbi Lezer ben Hyrcanus had been put in Chayrim because of a story Gemara brings down in Bamitzia. Rashi quotes it in Bamitzia Nuntes that he had a discussion with Rabbi Yeshua, and they were arguing about a case of an oven that was made from pieces that was assembled and had different parts to it, and it was just put together. Or is it considered one piece and one kli, and you have to be tovelit or not? And they fought and they used difficult terms against one another, and eventually Rabbi Lezer was put into Chayrim. So when he was on his deathbed, some of his students came in to visit him. So Nichnas Rabbi Akiva Chaver Rabbi Akiva and his friends came in to visit Rabbi Lezer ben Hyrcanus, who they had studied under. He sat under his bed. Rashi says it's a 4-posted bed with a canopy over it. He was in his bed. They were sitting like in the outer chamber in a corridor or a hall adjacent. But also Yomei of Shabbos. It was Erev Shabbos, and it was time to make Shabbos. V'nichnas Hyrcanus beno. Rabbi Lezer's name was Rabbi Lezer ben Hyrcanus. Obviously, his son was named after his father. So Hyrcanus' son came in, lachlot tefillah, to take off his tefillin. He came in to help his father take off his tefillin. That's what a son does when father is not well, puts on his tefillin, takes off his tefillin. He came in to take off his tefillin before Shabbos. Gorbo, Rabbi Lezer got very angry at Hyrcanus' son. The Yatzim Azif, and he went out dismayed, shamed, like he got angry at him. And Hyrcanus didn't know what he did wrong. It's before Shabbos, take off the tefillin. He said, so Hyrcanus said to Rabbi Akiva and the others there, it seems that my father's already lost his mind. He must be so sick that he's lost his mind. He's angry that I'm taking off his tefillin. Amr Lahen, so Rabbi Akiva said to him, Daito, the gear says, Daito Mushevas. He's normal. He knows what he's saying. But the mind of your mother, meaning Hyrcanus' mother, is confused. Why? Because she had not lit candles yet. Lit candles Erev Shabbos. You have to light candles before Shabbos, not on Shabbos. People think you light candles Friday night. You got to light it before. If you light them on Shabbos, chayiv skila, right? That's los vash b'chol meshvechim, unless of course go like Yossi that it's only allowed. But the point is that's an issur d'oraisa. And also, she hadn't put away the food before Shabbos. Rashi says she hadn't yet. She didn't put away the hot food, and you can't do that on Shabbos. You had to do it before Shabbos. So he says, you think your father has lost his mind? Your mother's lost her mind. Hey, and Isra, if you do these things on Shabbos, light the candles or put away the food, store the food and to make it hot on Shabbos, that's an Isra Skila. But Oskim Isra Shabbos. Technically, you can wear tefillin on Shabbos. There's no chiyuv to wear tefillin on Shabbos because we said tefillin is an os and Shabbos is an os. It's a sign. So since you have Shabbos, you don't have to put on tefillin. But the only reason you don't wear tefillin on Shabbos is because we're afraid that maybe you'll go out into the street, and even though it's considered a levush, it's considered a garment, but you might take it off and carry it. So the Rabbanan said, don't wear tefillin on Shabbos. That's only an isur. It's an isur Rabbanan. So he says, you think your father is crazy for sending you out about the tefillin? Just the opposite. He's the He's upset that you haven't you haven't lit candles yet. You haven't taken care of Shabbos. This isn't as important, taking off the film. Once the Chacham saw that his mind was, even though he was on his deathbed, that his mind was still clear, they came in the Yashvul in front of, and they sat in front of Merachok Dalan Amos, 4 Amos away, because he had still been put, as we said, he was in Chayrim. Rav Lezer was in Chayrim, so they didn't want to sit right next to him. Amr Lahu, he said to them, Lama Basim, why have you come? Amr Lahu, they told him, Lil Mo Torah Ban, we came to learn. We came to learn Torah from you, Rebbe. Amr Le Varach Shav Lama Basim, why didn't you come till now? Amr Le, Lahoy Lanu, we didn't have time. And he told them, to me, I would be astounded if you guys die a normal death, a normal natural death. That's what he told them. I don't know if because he felt that they were lying or they were against him, whatever, but he was upset. Rabbi Kiva, Shalima, what about me? Rabbi Kiva said to him, how was Rabbi Kiva going to die? So Rabbi Lezer answered him, and yours is going to be worse than theirs, as we know. Rabbi Kiva was terribly tortured by the Romans. Natal. Now, Rabbi Lezer knew he was dying, but his mind was clear. He took his 2 arms, and put them over his heart. Amar, he said, woe unto my 2 arms. They are like 2 Sifrei Torah which are rolled up, meaning that you can't read them because they're rolled up. Harbe Torah lamadati, I learned much Torah, v'harbe Torah limadati, and I taught much Torah. Harbe Torah lamadati, I learned much Torah, v'lechasarti merbas afil kekel v'mlakim benayam. I've only taken away from my rebbes. In other words, I've learned so much Torah, but it's like a drop in the bucket. As much as a dog can can lap up from the sea. In other words, it's nothing. What I've learned is like a drop in the bucket from my rabbanim. And I've taught much Torah, my Tamidim have not diminished me, my learning. In other words, they haven't taken away from me as much as the painting stick takes out of a tube. In other words, just a small amount. In other words, it's woe into these arms that have so much Torah, but nobody's been learning, maybe because he was in Chayrim, so they didn't learn from him. He says, I learned a lot, but it's nothing. I only got a drop in the bucket from my rebbes, and my students have only taken a drop in the bucket of me. I have learned 3 different halachas, and as I've gone into great detail in the issue of Negom, if you have a very deep, bright spot, nobody even asked me about it. I've learned so much, and nobody's taken advantage of it. Nobody's learned. I've gone into such detail. Nobody's interested. I've learned 300 different halachas. Some say 3,000 halachas, a large amount. Benatias kishuin, how to plant cucumbers, meaning the concept of using kishuf, using sorcery for making cucumbers grow, for planting cucumbers. Nobody even asked me about that, even though I learned all that. Except for you, Rabbi Kiva ben Yosef. We were walking together. Again, we see that Rabbi Kiva was a Talmud of Rabbi Lezer. This is Rabbi Eliezer. We were on the road. We were on the road. He said to me, Rebbe, teach me about the worlds of sorcery, how to plant the cucumbers. I said something, and as I put out some words, and the Smalakal Sadik Shur, the whole field was full of cucumbers. Rebbe, you've shown me how to plant them, and how to make them grow. How do you uproot them? How do you make them disappear? And I said one thing, and as I said some sorcery, and the they were all gathered up into a pile. So here you see, this is really the source. Here you see that Rabbi Akiva learned the halachas of kishuf, how that works from Rabbi Lezer, and that's going to be the kasha. We didn't even finish the story yet, but that's going to be the kasha. How did the Mishnah say Rabbi Akiva learn from Rabbi Yeshua this business about the kishuf, how you make the cucumbers appear and disappear? But anyway, he goes on. They said to him, but like so to speak, before he died, what's the halacha? Because he had disagreed with the rabbis about the following issues. Amrlo, hakadur, all these things that we're going to talk about, a list of things were, normally we know that if something is a kli, it's chayiv in tefillah, right? That it can become tamei. What about if it's a piece of leather that encloses something? For example, it's like a ball that's enclosed by leather. So it's like a leather ball that has stuffing inside. Now, normally it's only mekabel tuma if it has a base kibble. If you could put some stuff in it, it's a receptacle. Well, is this a receptacle? But it's stuffed up. It's a stuffed up ball with the outside being leather. What about there? But Amos is like what they call a last. It's like the form that they make shoes on. The shoemaker would use this a last today, however it's produced, or it's more metal, but maybe it's metal today. But in those days, it was made out of leather, and they put the shoe and they formed the shoe on that. Vakami, on an amulet, also covered with leather. The Tzura Margolis, or if you had a pearl that was covered up also, like a pearl stone that was covered up with leather. Rashi says that they use that for refuah, for animals. They would sew leather around it. Somehow that was refuah. Or a small weight. All these things were covered with leather. What's the halacha? That's the halacha. So keep your finger there on the Gemara, 4 lines into the wide lines in the Gemara. Look in the Rashi in the wide lines. Rashi, at the beginning of the wide lines, Reb Lezer had argued with the Chacham and say to Taharas, unless it's got a receptacle. Bahani, it's compared to a sack. In other words, something that has a receptacle, you can put stuff in. Since these things are made to fill up, and as they're all filled, it stays there forever. There's no receptacle in the ball. There's no receptacle in these things, because these things are made with it's a permanent cover. It's a leather permanent cover on what was inside. What was inside filled it up. So it's not a really receptacle anymore. So the Chacham said that's not a kibble. It's not a base kibble, because it's like the stuff inside is permanently there, so there's no receptacle. Therefore, it's not makabel tuma. Rabbi Lezer Omer makabel tuma. The base kibble also in mouse is still called the base kibble. It is a receptacle, just as something is there all the time. But nechlaku b'kadav amos shenikru. They also argued about, let's say you had this ball, leather covered ball, or this leather covered last shenikru that tore. And you could see the inside. The other Rabbanan Modas makabel tuma, because it's now you can see it's a receptacle, because it's torn, the outside's torn, the inside is filled up. So it's upligi in tefillah. But the question is, you have to be tovelit. Shacham rash betocho chotzeis, or not. Everybody agrees it's tamei, but the question is the stuff inside a chatzitza? The Chum say it's a chatzitza. You have to remove it in order to be tovelit. The Chum Ramot, if it's torn. Now you could see the receptacle inside. You could see that it's a receptacle, and you have to be tovelit, but you have to take out the inside, the stuffing, because what's inside, because it's a chatzitz. Rav Lezer Omer, it's the kuli chad kli. It's all one kli. Uvishas piturasu, when Rav Lezer was dying, did he retract his opinion? What do you say about those two machlokas? Number one, is it makabel tuma? And number two, if it's torn and everybody agrees it's makabel tuma, is the stuffing inside? Is that a chatzitza? Amar lahen. So now back in the Gemara, Rashi picks it up. The big Amar lahen hein tmeim. They are tamei. B'tarosan b'mashahen. He stood his ground, and he said that they are tamei. In other words, he said that was considered a base kibble the way they are. And if they were torn, if it was torn up, right? If it was torn up, he said it's makabel tama. And he said to them, even if they're shleim, and how are they? And how do you matar them if they tore? The chomer motor there that's makabel tuma, but the chum say that it's a chatzitza. And he says, no, I maintain my argument. Rashi is in other words, his argument that he had with the chum on both counts. Number one is makabel tuma, and number two, if it's torn, do you have to remove the inside, or is that a chatzitza? I maintain my argument that it could be you could be matar the way it is now. Then they asked him another question. Minol sha'al gavi amos. What about the shoe that's on the last? That's on this form or this mold, call it. That they make the shoe on there, and it's ready to be removed, but it hasn't been removed yet. The shoe is basically complete, but it hasn't been removed from the last. Is it makabel tuma? Is it considered complete or not? Ma'u amalahen hu tor. He said it's already tor, meaning it's still tor because it's not yet been removed. So the Chacham say there, right? They argued about that too. Rashi says 5 lines from the bottom of the page in Rashi. The Taras Chacham Omrim, since there's nothing left to do, all you have to do is take it off the mold, off this last. It's not mechutz or anything, and it's makabel tumah. Right? It doesn't need any. All it needs is any kid could just take it off. You don't need a craftsman to remove it. Anybody could do it. For Hashem Kliyel, if it's a Kli, it's tummy. Rav Lezer says it's Torah, it's not considered Igma Malachto. So Rav Lezer argued about all these things, and he maintained his argument. He didn't retract even on his deathbed. And as he said that the shoe is still Tahor, it remains Torah because the work has not been completed. Yatzin Shmos B'Tara. When he said that word Tahor, he expired, he died. Amar Rabbi Yeshua Raglov. So Rabbi Yeshua stood up. Amar Hutar Neder Hutar Neder. Rabbi Yeshua had been his bar plukta who had argued with him. And in the case of the Tanur Achanoi, the Tanur that was made out of pieces, out of movable parts, let's say, that you could remove, not move, but removable parts. He says a hutra neder, meaning he's now out of chayrim. Now that they blessed him that they removed that they put him in chayrim. That chayrim was now removed, and he could be buried in a normal way. L'matzah Shabbos. Now this was all right before Shabbos. This took place. On Matzah Shabbos, Pogo Rabbi Kiva min Kisri Lud. As they were taking the beer from Caesarea to Lud, they ran into Rabbi Kiva, and they told him that he died. Hayamaka b'psoro, and while they met Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva told them, or it's not clear what what happened, but they met Rabbi Kiva on the way as they were proceeding to the funeral, and he beat himself out until he was bleeding. And in the Shiur where they by the Levaya, he started lamenting, and he was eulogizing Omar, Avi, my father, Rechiv Yisrael, Parashav, the chariot of Israel and the horsemen. Harbe Mos, like he was, Rabbi Kiva was upset now that terribly he was an Avelis because his Rebbe Rav Lezer died. Harbe Mos Yeshli. I've got a lot of money, but I have no money changers, so to speak, to make it useful. Meaning, I have nobody to ask all my shilas to. That was the story. That was the story that that when they took the beer from that place, this all happened, and the whole story with Rabbi Kiva visiting Rabbi Lezer, and Rabbi Lezer died, the whole thing. Now, but what do you see here? You see that Rabbi Kiva learned the halachas of kishuf not from Rabbi Yeshua, as it mentions in our Mishnah, rather from Rabbi Lezer. Alma Rabbi Lezer Gomer. So you see, he learned from Lezer. Answers Gomer Rabbi Lezer below suffer. He learned from Lezer, but he didn't understand it. How to Gomer Rabbi Yeshua? Then he learned from Yeshua, and he explained it to him. He understood it. But how could you do this kind of stuff with kishuf? We learned on Mishnah also ma'isa chayiv. If you do a ma'isa of kishuf, you're chayiv misa. So how could he do this? He says, I learned how to do it. What are you learning, sorcery? He answered, Islam and Shani, just to learn it. To learn how to do it, that's different, because you have to know how to do it so you know what it is, and you know how to counter the goyim who practice it on you. Damar lo silmod lasos. The pasuk says you shouldn't learn to do this. Lasos you don't do it in order to practice it. But you could learn it in order to understand it and to teach others how to do it. But in order to actually do it, not to practice it to learn how to do it, but not to actually use it as in kishuf, that you're not supposed to do. And ends this parak, and now we come to, pardon? He did it, yeah, he did it, but just to learn how to do it. So you should know how to do it, maybe to counter the goyim, or to understand what it really is, or can you really be mechayiv somebody misa if you don't even know what they did? So to understand how it's done, that you're allowed to do, but not to actually practice it in real life. Says the Mishnah, Ben Saramora, the stubborn and rebellious son, famous story. Now, of course, we'll see it's a machlokes in the Gemara. The general assumption is the Kabbalah is that it can never happen. It can never happen because the circumstances for a Ben Saramora are so difficult. Both parents have to have the exact same voice, blah, 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 and they have to be, there's so many different details that it's very hard for it to happen. And that's why, the question is, why would you give him skila? Skila, Ben Saramora is, again, one of the cases that you give skila to. Why give him skila? As we'll see, if you're only trying to remove him from this world in order to make it easier for him so he shouldn't go out letarbus ra and do terrible things. So why give him the worst kind of misa? The answer is it really can't happen. You're just trying to scare him, so you scare him with the worst thing. So Ben Sara Moram, Amos Inas Ben Sara. From what age can be Ben Sara? We'll see he has to be bar mitzvah. Whenever you see shtei saros means that he has 2 pubic hairs in the same place, and he's bar mitzvah. In other words, a bar mitzvah boy today has to be 13 and have hair. If he doesn't have the hair, or if he's either one, or if he's not, if he has the hair before he's bar mitzvah, it's not considered hair. It's considered like a mole or something, but it's got to be for Yeshua. So same thing over here. Even though we'll see Ben Sora is really punished for what he was going to become, not that his sin was so terrible at this point, but he's not punished unless he's bar mitzvah. So he has to be bar mitzvah from the time that he's 13 and he has 2 hairs. Until the lower area means until his beard is grown. What does that mean? The beard means, we're not talking about the beard on his face, he's talking about the beard in his pubic area. But the Chacham called that a beard rather than say pubic hair. They spoke in a nice, in a pleasant, in a pleasant way, in a pleasant way. Pardon? A euphemism, yeah. Lashon Nikiya, more polite, in a polite way. Shenemar. It's also a beard. It's just goes you're right. It's like a euphemism. Instead of calls it the beard, but it means that area there. Shenemar. Now, how do we know? So as we'll see, he's only can be a Ben Sora during that period from his bar mitzvah, not the bar mitzvah in shul. The bar mitzvah when he's bar mitzvah until the hair grows, and we'll see 3 months, maximum of 3 months. So if his hair grows really fast in a month or 2 months. Then once the hair is grown down there, then he can no longer be a ben sora. He's potter. It's that's halacha. Or if 3 months have passed, either one, as we'll see in tomorrow's daf. Ben, if a man has a son, so we learned several things for them. Number one, ben v'lo bas, even though the girl could also do these terrible things, but Pasuk says only a son. Ben v'lo ish, a man, a son, and not a man. That means, what does it mean, v'lo ish? It's got to be a son, not a fully grown man, meaning not a man who already has the zakana tachtam. And then he says, cotton potter. Why is a cotton if he's not bar mitzvah? He's potter shelo ba'alachal mitzvahs because he's not chai for mitzvahs. He has no mitzvahs to say. He has no mitzvahs. He's not chai in mitzvahs at all. You can't punish him if he's not bar mitzvah. Okay, says the Gemara, cotton minol the potter. How do you know a cotton's potter? Now you say the Gemara says, what do you mean minol? What kind of a question is that? Minola, and how do you know a cotton's potter? A cotton is potter on all mitzvahs. What was your kasha? Well, how do you know a cotton's potter? What do you mean? A cotton's potter on all mitzvahs. Where do you find that the Torah punished a cotton? Number one, he says cotton on the potter. Number one, we said because he's not in chal mitzvahs. And second of all, where do you find in other cases that he's punished? That the Torah punishes a katan, that you need a pasuk over here to tell you that he's potter. Where do you get that from? It's obvious that he's potter. So what's the kasha here? Katan, how do you know that he's potter? Number one, it said the Mishnah said because he's not chayiv in mitzvahs. Number two, where do you ever find that he's chayiv, that he should be potter over here? That you need a pasuk to tell me that he's potter. He's never chayiv in any mitzvahs. This is what I meant the kasha. Ben Sora Mora al Cheton, is he really punished for his sin? After all, what is the sin that he did? We see he stole some money from his father. He bought some meat. He ate some meat and he drank some wine with some bad friends. He had bad company. So because of that, he's killed. Ben Sora Mora al Cheton is killed. Hashem Sofen he's killed to remove him from the world before he really does bad things. Since he's only killed because of what he's going to become. I feel Katanami. What's the difference? What he says? He's not killed. He's not chayiv really. As we know, there's not even an onshin. You don't even give till 20 years old. They say at least from onshin ben Shemaim, not till he's 20 years old. But certainly a bar mitzvah. If he's not killed in a normal way for the sin that he's done, but he's killed to remove him from the world. What's the difference if he's 13 or if he's 12? V'kivin al shem sof and erega. I feel Katanami. V'od ben v'lo ish. When it says ben v'lo ish. V'od ben v'lo ish katan mashma, right? And it says ben v'lo ish. We also know that that's called a katan. So what's what's the idea over here? Since he's killed because of what's going to happen to him later on. So maybe how do you know that a katan is potter? Maybe he should be, even if he's 9 or 10, he should also be killed to remove him. It says ben v'lo ish katan mashma. Even if he's a katan, he's a ben sora mora. It says v'chi ish ben sora mora. And ben's mashma, even a child. So maybe even a 5 or 10-year-old would also be chayiv. So how do you know that a katan is really potter? He's not killed because of the sin. He's killed to remove him. So if he's killed to remove him, maybe Hitaka should be killed. How do you know that a cotton's potter? Don't tell me because he's not chayiv in mitzvahs and he's not punished elsewhere. Here he's not, it's not a punishment. Here it's a removal. It's doing him a favor. Ben v'lo cotton mashma. It says ben mashma child. Amrav, how do we know? Ben. What does that mean? Lish ben. Since it says leish ben, we're talking about a ben, a samach g'vurasa shalish, a boy who's quite near the strength of a man, meaning he's already bar mitzvah. That's how we know that if he's 12 or he doesn't have hair yet, whatever, then he's potter, because it says v'chiyel ish ben. It's a strange lush. V'chiyel ish ben. As we'll see, if there's another drasha too. V'chiyel ish ben. If this ish ben will be close to being a man, that's when he's chayav. If he's a cotton, he's potter. You don't kill him. When we say until he grows the zakan atachton, the lower beard, right? It's until it surrounds the crown. Yes, mean covering it goes around the penis. It doesn't have to go all the way down to his testicles. In other words, it doesn't have to go that far. Rav Chisda held, we had a discussion in Yevamis, can a person who's not 13 years old yet, remember we had a discussion there also about a girl. If a girl has children when she's 10 years old. Today, maybe medically things can be done differently. Medicine is different today. Health is different today. But in those days, you couldn't, the assumption is you can't father a child until you're 13, and you can't give birth to a girl. A girl cannot give birth until she's 12 years old. If she gave birth and to a viable child, we assume she's already bat mitzvah. So here the question is this: Rav Chisda held that a child, even if he's not bar mitzvah, could father a child. Rav Chisda. Cotton shaholid, if he gave birth, ein beno nasa ben sarmara. The child who gave birth, the child of that child cannot be ben sarmara. Shenemar ki leish ben v'lo leben ben. In other words, the ben sarmara has to be the son of an adult, not the son of a child. V'lo leben ben. Again, because he learns that ki leish ben. If a man will have a son, leish ben. Below leben ben, that's how he darshans. Each ben, a father, an adult has to have a son. But if the son has a son, meaning if a child has a son, that the child's son cannot be a ben sarmar based on this pasuk. That's what Rav Chisda said. But Rav Chisda's assumption is that a son could have a son, a child couldn't father a child. That's his shita. This is more a Haimi boy like Rabbi Yehuda, but we just said we use it for Rabbi Yehuda Rav. We just quoted this pasuk. We said, how do you know that a child, if he's not bar mitzvah, is potter from being a son ben sarmara? Because it says ki ish ben asamach ligvarasa shalish. Use it for that drasha. Hi, me boy like Rav Yehuda Marav. Zim can if we only be for that lame because the pasuk says ki ben ish. Oh, if it only be for that drasha of Yehuda Marav, we would say if there were ki ben ish, if there was a son to a father, okay, but if a man has a son, and Yadarshan ben lish, meaning ben asamach lish, he's near being a man, meaning he's bar mitzvah. My kiyeh ish ben. Why does it say not kiyeh ben ish, but it says kiyeh ish ben? If a father will have a son, meaning a father of a son, not a son's son. Shema minok obviously see it for Chisda drasha. So maybe it's only for that drasha to tell me that if a son has a son, meaning if a minor has a son, that son cannot be a ben sarmora, and we don't know Rabbi Yehuda's drash. Maybe Rabbi Yehuda's drash is invalid, and really a 10-year-old born from a regular father could be a ben sarmora. So Zimke name a ben ish. Let it just say ben ish. Oh, ben ish. So it would tell me both a son who is near being a father, and it would also, ben being a father, and also tell me that if it's all for a Chisda's drasha, it should just say name it ben ish. It'd be a son of a father of a man, not the son of a child. My ish ben, since it says it in this form, Shemayin Atarchi, you see both things. And Rashi says in the wide lines of Rashi near the bottom, not near the bottom, about 10 lines from the bottom in Rashi, Shemamin Atarti, different maskul. You can see both things. Kia ben leish, shiagil grasa shalish. Mishtamanami avu on the father, kia leish godol ben v'lo yish cotton ben. Only if an adult, meaning if an adult has a child, but not if a minor has a child. So that's what we learn both Rushes from here. But this goes according to Rav Chisda, who a minor b'chlal could have a child. Upliga back in the Gemara, 3 lines from the bottom of the page in the Gemara. Pliga to Rabba, this disagrees with Rabba, Dama Rabba. Cotton ain't a molid. A minor cannot have a child. He can't father a child. Shenemar. In other words, if you think it's his child, it's not his child. He physically can't do it. Shenemar. Im ein liish goel. Pasuk there talks about if you swear falsely that you don't owe, so you stole money from somebody or you deny a loan, whatever, and you swear falsely, and then you admit it, you have to pay him back and add 25%. Let's say the guy you paid back is dead, and he has no relations. So you give it to the Kohen, okay? To the Kohen. Like Mara says, it's the pasuk says, "Im ein liish goel." If the man who died has no goel, meaning he has no relations, he has nobody to take his place. Everybody has a relative. Could be 100th cousin, but going back to we're all children of Yaakov, everybody has a cousin. Oh, we're talking about if you stole from a ger. A ger has no relatives, right? He's a ger dummy. He may have no relatives. Okay. It says the main each goel. Who are we speaking about? Who is somebody who may not have a relative? It's only a ger. Okay. V'Omer Rachmana at the top of Samach Tes. Omer Rachmana ish. It says that he mainly ish goel. If this ger who man, it says if he's a man, if the ger is a bar mitzvah, he's a man, then you have to check. Maybe he had children. Maybe after he was Megayer, he could have had a child. So you maybe have to give the money back to the child. But if the ger is only 12, if he's not bar mitzvah, imlav cotton. If not, if he was only a cotton, if he's not a man, you don't have to check if he has any children because he can't have any children. It's impossible. If the ger is 12 years old and he died, and you swore falsely and you owe him the money, you don't have to check if he had any children because he can't. You know that he has no children. That's Rabba Shita. So Rabba and Rav Chisda argue about this question. He's not arguing. Rabba's not arguing necessarily with the halacha. Rav Chisda said that if a minor had a child, the child of that minor cannot be a ben sarmara because he dashes ish ben. It only is if a man has a child, but not if a minor has a child. Rabbah says it can't even happen anyway. Ish ish. When it comes to if a man slept with a shifcha charufa, the halach over there in Yishkaves ish shifcha zera. If a man sleeps with a woman, it says v'chi ish ki yishkav es ish isha shifcha zera. The pasuk goes on there. So it's only if a man slept with her. If he's 9 years old, we've learned many times he can have bia. He can have an erection. He can have bia. Minayin. How do we know that pasuk also refers to a 9-year-old who slept with a shifcha charufa? Tamalomer veish. The ve adds on not only a man, not only a bar mitzvah, even if he's 9 years old and he had bia. So what do you see? That a 9-year-old could have bia. So how could Rabbah say that if he's not bar mitzvah, he can't father a child? Amalei yeshlo. He can have bia. He can have bia. Ve'ein molid. He can have bia, but he can't. His semen cannot impregnate a woman. Kitvu shlo ivia shlish. It's like produce or cereal that hasn't grown a third. The seeds out of that plant cannot fertilize or make more plants. Cannot grow. That's what he means. It's like ketvu shelo ivia shlishkami. It's like produce that hasn't grown a third. It's those seeds cannot further produce. It cannot grow. The Bechizkiya Tani learns it from this. It says v'chiyazit ish. Pasuk is when it comes to murder. If a man on purpose, intentionally plans to murder somebody, why did it say v'chiyazit ish? What's that lashon? Let it just say v'chi yarshi. If a man is bad and he was a bad guy and he wants to murder somebody, the answer is ish mezid masri. A man can heat himself up, can cook himself up. He can excite himself and get aroused, and he can impregnate a man. Vein cotton masri. It says v'chiyazit ish. If a man heats himself up and murders, the board is to say a lashon of mezid. Because a man can heat himself up and implant, meaning can impregnate. Ain't cotton mezid masri. He learns the same thing like Rabbah. Amalei Rav Mordechai Rav Ashi. My mash b'nahai mezid lishon b'shahai. How do you know mezid is lashon of cooking or heating up? The Siva says vayosed Yaakov yot nazir. We have the story with Yaakov and Esau that he was cooking up some pottage over there, right? Cooking a cholent. And Esau came in, wanted to eat the food. Okay. Says the Gemara, the Aini, is that really this case? But Tana Shmuel Ben V'loav. Let's understand something. Saying over here that if we're suing now, like Rabbah said, that if he's not 13 years old, at least in those days, he couldn't impregnate. So therefore, he says there's no issue. It can't be, a minor cannot have a child, right? Minor cannot have a child, so it's not material. You can't, even though he can have bia, he can copulate with a woman, but he can't impregnate her. That's Rabbi Shita. Is that really the case for Tana Rishmal ben V'loav? And you say over here that only only the son of a man can become a ben soromora, but not the son of a child, right? Ben V'loav, only if he's a son of a man, but not if he's the father of a child. How could it be? Understand, if he impregnated her after he was bar mitzvah, at his bar mitzvah, and gave birth before, remember, the ben sora or mora can only be, right? We say ben v'loav, right? Ben v'loav. Now, what is the case? If he said he impregnated this woman, right, before, Rabbi Shmuel really says, meaning that he's a ben, Rabbi Shmuel learns, sorry, it's not exactly what Rav Chissa. Rav Chissa said that the son of a minor cannot be a ben soromora. Rabbi Shmuel says ben v'loav, he must be a child, a son, but not a father. He can't be a father. If the ben sora is also a father, he's not only the son, obviously, of somebody, but if he's a father, it doesn't apply. He's a ben v'loav. Hechidami. How's that speaking about? If he impregnated her after he was bar mitzvah. And when did he become a father? When did he give birth? Before the hair grew, before the suck of kavan. Can he have such a long period of time? In other words, he impregnated her as soon as he was bar mitzvah. And when did she give birth? Before he grew the zakan. Remember, he can only be a ben sora from the time that he had two hairs until he grew a beard down there, right? Mika shows kolahai, can he at such a big time? As we mentioned before in the Mishnah, that ben sora can only be the time period, that a potential time period for ben sora is only 3 months. And how could she couldn't give birth in 3 months? And how can Rabbi Shmuel, Tanur Shmuel say that you have to be a ben soromora, but not if he's a father? The ben soromora who's a bad kid, if he's already a father, is excluded from the parsha. How could he be a father? If he impregnated her, if he only impregnated her at the time he was bar mitzvah, let's say in the day he was bar mitzvah, he impregnated somebody. Well, by the time they gave birth, that was 7 or 8 or 9 months later, right? A long time later, it can't be, because Rabbi says that it's only 3 months. It can only be 3 months. It must be that he impregnated her before he was bar mitzvah. And when did he become the ben soromora? Okay, after he was bar mitzvah, he impregnated her, let's say when he was 12 and a half. And then he became ben, he gave birth. The woman that he impregnated gave birth before he grew the beard. Ushmami a cotton mullet. So you see, there must be that a cotton good. How could Reb Tanur Shmuel says ben soromora can only be a ben soromora if he's not a father? How could he be a father? If he can only impregnate after he's bar mitzvah, well, then he only has from bar mitzvah for 3 months. Either bar mitzvah or either 3 months or the time that it takes to grow a zakan until he has the zakan. And then he would have the baby later on. He couldn't be a ben soror anyway, because the baby would be born after he had the beard. So it doesn't work. But it must be only if he impregnated when he was 12 and a half. So you see, a child could impregnate. It says lo. La'olam the abra basar daisi shtei saros. The truth is, he impregnated her after he was bar mitzvah and after he would shtei saros. But they gave birth after, when he was 14, let's say, after he grew the beard. Rav said you're only for 3 months. Yes, Rav Dimi, when Rav Dimi came, Omar Amri Marav, they said in Israel, Ben v'lo haroy lekroso av. That's what it means. It doesn't mean only a son and he's not a father. He can't be a father. It's impossible, according to Rabbah, and the way we're learning now. It's impossible for a ben soromora to be a father, because he can only be a ben soror from let's say 13 till 13 and 3 months, and he can only impregnate from the time he's 13. So he can't be a father, but he's fit to be called a father because he's impregnated a woman. So when we say over here that they explain when Tanrei Shmuel said he's a Ben Sarmora, but not if he's a father. If he's a father, he can't be a Ben Sarmora. We don't know if he's already a father. I mean, he's he's fit to be called a father because he's impregnated her, and he's going to be his wife, or the woman that he impregnated is with child, and he's going to be a father. All right, we'll pick it up here tomorrow. Mitzvah from Gufa. Amrav Kiswer will continue this discussion about the 3 months and impregnating, etc. But you see over here that a Ben Sarmar can only be for that period of time, and we have this machlokas whether he can impregnate even before he's 13 years old. We'll pick up from Gufa tomorrow, Mitzvah. Have a good day. Shavua tov.